Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Darling, bring your heirloom jewelry box. Mom needs some fresh air. She's decided to buy a summer house. But as soon as he opened the box, her husband froze. Carmelita was so exhausted that on her way home, she started counting her steps in her head. The night shift had been particularly grueling. The previous evening, a massive traffic accident had occurred near the city's entrance, involving a truck, an intercity bus, and several cars. All night long, injured victims were brought into their hospital, one after another, until nearly dawn. Most injuries were minor, but a few patients had arrived in critical condition. However, Carmelita had long since grown accustomed to the demands of her work and didn't complain about her fate. For nearly 15 years, Carmelita had been saving lives, but she had never gotten used to other people's suffering. She felt the pain of her patients as if it were her own. Dolores, the head nurse of the department, had often tried to influence her protégé. "Carmelita, you can't go on like this. You'll burn out quickly if you keep taking everything to heart." But Carmelita couldn't do it any other way, even though she tried to change her attitude toward her work. Yet the burnout that Dolores kept warning her about never materialized. That fact pleased Carmelita because more than anything, she feared losing her compassion and becoming hardened. In private conversations with her colleagues, Carmelita liked to remind them of their noble calling. A medical worker's heart is like a barometer. If the primary indicator of compassion drops to zero, it's time for that person to consider a career change. Of course, not everyone appreciated such an interpretation of professional responsibilities. Recently, a young doctor with the amusing last name of Soto had gotten into a debate with the seasoned nurse. "Carmelita, if we go by what you're saying, half of our department's medical staff should be fired for incompetence. Some could be sent to construction sites, others to street cleaning. You won't like this, but personally, I think being a doctor is just a trade, like cooking or tailoring." Since hospital hierarchy was a strict red line that couldn't be crossed, Carmelita responded politely. "I'd like to believe, Arturo, that you chose the right field of study. Though shoemaking is also an honorable craft, its mistakes are easier to fix and don't endanger lives." Carmelita was actively supported by the experienced nurses and orderlies, while the younger staff held their tongues. Their silence spoke volumes, revealing that their not always harmonious team had split into two camps. Carmelita was deeply upset by this and shared her concerns with Dolores. "Dolores, we need to do something about the younger staff. Where did they even pick up such attitudes?" The head nurse gave Carmelita a friendly pat on the back, just below her right shoulder blade. "Carmelita, I've been at the helm for nearly 30 years, and I've seen it all. You've been around long enough, too. At first, these young specialists come in all cocky, but we both know how to clip their wings. Give it 6 months, and our Soto will be as meek as a lamb. The kid's got backbone, and my gut tells me he's destined to become a leading surgeon. As for the nonsense he's spouting now, it's just a phase." Carmelita smiled, recalling Soto. She had been on the night shift with Arturo, and the young doctor had truly shown himself to be a consummate professional, which pleasantly surprised her. It wasn't until Carmelita entered her building that she realized she had lost count. She had tried countless times to measure the distance in steps from her house to the bus stop, but she had yet to succeed in completing the task. She thought to herself, "I should borrow Andre's pedometer and measure it some morning." Her thoughts shifted from work to household matters. She imagined how surprised her husband would be when she asked to borrow his step counter. Every morning, Andre set his alarm for 6 o'clock and went for a run, regardless of the weather. He tried to involve both his wife and son in his healthy lifestyle, but Carmelita always responded to his suggestions with humor. "Andre, the neighbors might get the wrong idea if the whole family goes out jogging together." Eduardo was equally skeptical about his father's hobby. "Dad, I'm not like you. I'm weak-willed. I like to sleep in." If his father started lecturing him, Eduardo would put on a serious face and recite dramatically, "Father, forgive this youth for his laziness and dreams." To outsiders, this all seemed amusing, but Andrei took offense at his son's antics. Pushkin was a genius. He's untouchable. And you, clown, shouldn't mock him. Eduardo had been attending his school's drama club for the second year and was proud of his achievements in the arts. Andrei, however, considered it an unworthy pursuit for a real man. This difference often caused disputes in the family. Carmelita, however, refrained from taking sides. Her impartiality allowed her to maintain a balance of power within the household. As Carmelita opened the apartment door, she immediately tripped over her son's sneakers. Frustrated, she muttered, "He's left his shoes scattered around again. No matter how much I tell him, he keeps doing it his way." She put Eduardo's shoes into the closet, took off her coat, and sighed. "That's it, Carmelita. Now you'll have a coffee and go to bed. After a night shift, especially one so hectic, you need to recover. And the best way to do that is with a good sleep." She walked into the kitchen, only to find it in disarray. She felt on the verge of tears from exhaustion. Seriously, what's wrong with people? Is it that hard to clean up after themselves? Just wait, tonight I'm going to give them both an earful. Her mood teetering on the edge, Carmelita started angrily tossing cups and plates into the sink, the clattering accompanied by short remarks aimed at her two messy housemates, who seemed capable only of making a mess and incapable of cleaning up after themselves. She noticed traces of the morning's breakfast on the kitchen floor as well. Grabbing a broom and dustpan, she began sweeping. When she dumped the crumbs and candy wrappers into the trash can, something caught her eye, a crumpled sheet of notebook paper at the bottom. At first, Carmelita dismissed it, thinking, it's probably something Eduardo threw out. He was doing homework, made a mistake, and ripped out a page. But as she headed to her bedroom, a nagging thought made her turn back. No, Eduardo wouldn't tear up his school notebook, she reasoned. Carefully, she plucked the crumpled paper from the trash can with 2 fingers and smoothed it out. The sheet was half filled with writing. While Carmelita was familiar with her son's handwriting, this message wasn't written by him. Forgetting her initial caution, she flattened the page completely and began to read slowly. "Andrei, I'm sorry to bother you. I wouldn't have dared to ask, and my mom wouldn't have allowed it either, if it weren't for the trouble she's in. She doesn't tell me much, but I overheard her telling her friend that the doctors found some illness in her, one that people die from. But I don't want my mom to die, because I have no one else. Please, Andrei, help my mom. This illness they found can be treated in another city. Mom even told Aunt Rita about it. But the treatment costs a lot of money, and we don't have it. So I thought you might be able to lend us at least a little. I'm almost done with school, and I'll start working soon. I promise to pay you back every penny. I swear." At the bottom of the letter, written just as neatly, was the name. Yanina Chella. Is she a relative or something? I thought I knew all of Andrei's family, but there's no Yanina among them. And as far as I know, Eleonora, my highly esteemed mother-in-law, only had one child. So, Andrei can't have any close relatives. Unless, of course, they're from his late father's side? This is all so strange. And where's the address? Carmelita dumped the contents of the trash can onto the floor. At the top of the pile was a crumpled envelope, similar to the letter. She carefully placed both items into a bag and murmured thoughtfully, I don't like any of this. Why didn't Andrei tell me about this letter? He must be hiding something from me. Carmelita decided to check the address on the envelope again. Village of Andreevka. Huh. How poetic. He's Andrei from Andreevka. Her thoughts were tangled, and she forgot that just minutes ago, she had been longing for sleep. Maybe I should just ask Andrei directly instead of racking my brain. Or conduct a little investigation on my own. Her decision was interrupted by the persistent ringing of the doorbell. Startled, Carmelita quickly hid the bag with the evidence and muttered in despair, oh no, what on earth brought her here so early? Doesn't she ever sleep? Trekking across town at this hour. The bell rang again, and Carmelita, cursing her luck and her audacious mother-in-law, headed to the entryway. She barely opened the door when Eleonora swept into the apartment, skipping greetings altogether and diving straight into her speech. "Good thing I caught you at home. Not working today?" Carmelita stepped aside to let her mother-in-law in, closing the door behind her. She realized her plans for sleep were completely ruined, but forced herself to smile and be polite. "Come in, Eleonora. I just got home from my night shift, exhausted to death, and was hoping to catch a bit of sleep. You can sleep later." "I won't be long," Eleonora replied, unfazed by the clear hint that her visit was poorly timed. She looked around the entryway as if inspecting it, then marched into the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. At the threshold, she gasped, "Why is your kitchen such a mess?" Carmelita glanced at the pile of trash she had left on the floor and blushed. "I lost an earring. I thought I might have thrown it out with the garbage." Eleonora smirked. "Did you find it?" Carmelita didn't understand at first. "What?" Her mother-in-law gave her another pointed look. "Your earring. Did you find it? Seems like you've got both still in your ears." Carmelita instinctively touched her ear, realizing her excuse hadn't fooled Eleonora. In a strained voice, she replied, "Yes, I found it. I lost it yesterday, so I put on a different pair." Eleonora shook her head. "I see. Dressed for work like it's a celebration." Caught in a lie, Carmelita felt flustered and awkward. She busied herself near her guest. "Please, have a seat, Eleonora. I'll put the kettle on. Would you like some coffee?" The guest let out a significant sigh. "First, clean up the trash and wash your hands with soap. You're a medical professional. You should understand that unsanitary conditions contribute to the spread of infection. Personally, I avoid touching suspicious objects, and after shopping, I always wash my hands first and then sanitize them. I recommend you do the same as a preventive measure." Like many women her age, Eleonora loves to talk about medicine and culture. Despite having no formal education in either field, she considered herself an expert. She gathered information from the internet and then shared it with her friends and acquaintances. Carmelita wasn't spared from her mother-in-law's unsolicited advice on modern medicine, often enduring long-winded nonsense. Only once had Carmelita tried to argue with Eleonora, and it happened shortly after her wedding to Andre. Eleonora had been sharing her self-diagnosis and treatment methods for varicose veins, which left Carmelita dumbfounded. "Eleonora, that's complete nonsense. Such radical methods could seriously harm someone. Don't even think about trying them on yourself." Eleonora gave Carmelita a condescending look and scolded her without holding back. "If you had a medical degree, I might listen to you. But who is a nurse? Just a helper girl doing what the doctor orders. Mark my words, in less than 10 years, this unnecessary role will be eliminated entirely." Carmelita was deeply hurt by her mother-in-law's dismissive attitude toward her profession. "You're very mistaken, Eleonora. The nursing profession has its own specifics and a wide range of responsibilities." Eleonora immediately shut her down again. "You're so defensive of your useless job because you didn't finish your education. Honestly, I'm still surprised how the granddaughter of a professor could choose to be a nurse and settle for it. Was it really so hard to become a doctor? What stopped you, lack of effort or a lack of brains?" Eleonora often spoke to Carmelita in this tone. She would openly tell her daughter-in-law that she would have preferred a more educated woman by her son's side. "Carmelita, if it weren't for your family background and the apartment you inherited from your grandfather, I would never have let Andre marry you." One day, Carmelita couldn't hold back and asked a blunt question of her own. "I wonder, what makes your precious Andre so much better than me?" Eleonora's reaction was explosive. Her face first went pale, then turned crimson as her eyes flashed with anger. "You have the audacity to compare yourself to my son? At least Andre graduated from university and works in a managerial position, not cleaning up after bedridden patients. Your lot is to give enemas and clean up others' filth." Carmelita had no desire to explain the complexities of her work to Eleonora, knowing full well that her mother-in-law never listened. Andre, aware of his mother's character, avoided provoking her altogether. When Carmelita asked him to defend her, he would respond evasively. "Carmelita, please don't drag me into your arguments. The only advice I can give you is not to anger my mother. You're younger than her, you can afford to let it go." To keep the peace in her family, Carmelita endured her mother-in-law's antics in silence. Over the years, Eleonora had come to terms with her son's choice of wife, but from time to time, she would show up unannounced, especially when the mood struck her. Deep down, Carmelita pitied her eccentric relative. Eleonora had been widowed early and devoted her entire life to her only son. Now she lived alone on the other side of the city and visited frequently, likely to stave off boredom. As Carmelita set the table, her guest chatted away enthusiastically. "Carmelita, I didn't just come by for nothing. I need your advice," Eleonora said with a coquettish flutter of her eyes. Carmelita grew cautious. Eleonora was capable of anything, including stirring up trouble. But this time, Eleonora seemed to be in an amicable mood. Like a seasoned actress, she paused dramatically, then, with a blissful smile, announced, "Carmelita, I've decided to add a little excitement to my life, and I came to you for advice." She paused again, her eyes pleading and her sigh theatrical. Carmelita replied politely, "Of course, I'd be happy to help you, not just with advice." Eleonora lowered her eyes bashfully. "I don't even know where to begin. I don't want you to think your mother-in-law has completely lost her mind." In that moment, Carmelita wanted nothing more than to grab something heavy and knock some sense into her. But she suppressed the urge and said as gently as possible, "Eleonora, how could I think that about you? You're a brilliant woman and truly worthy of admiration." The blatant flattery worked wonders. A mischievous sparkle lit up Eleonora's eyes, and her brightly painted lips curved into a smile. "Oh, Carmelita, thank you for the kind words. I've been beside myself since yesterday," Eleonora said, scooting her chair closer to Carmelita and ignoring the cooling coffee in her elegant cup. "The thing is, Carmelita, my neighbor from the second building recently joined a theater group. She says many elderly people attend it. So, I decided to try my luck too. I even went to an audition yesterday." Carmelita chuckled nervously. "An audition?" Eleonora bristled. "Why do you keep repeating everything I say? And what's with the giggles? Maybe I have the soul of a great actress, and I just never had the chance to discover my talent." Eleonora rose from her chair, directed an intense gaze out the window, and began to declaim dramatically. "Why is this world so unjust? Why do I shiver from the cold in a kennel while Zuza sleeps by the fireplace on a silk cushion? The master feeds her meat, and I am left with bones." Her delivery was pompous and utterly comical. Carmelita hiccuped a few times before bursting into uncontrollable laughter. Eleonora's eyes widened in disbelief as Carmelita struggled to catch her breath, unable to stop laughing for several minutes. Finally, as the laughter subsided, Carmelita managed to choke out, "Eleonora, I'm sorry, truly, it was very expressive, I swear. I just don't understand why you're shivering in a kennel." The question left Eleonora speechless. She blinked in confusion for half a minute before pouting indignantly. "How dense you are, Carmelita." That was an excerpt from the monologue of an abandoned dog. I was given this role in the theater group. The premiere is set for just before New Year's. I just don't understand why you're laughing. Carmelita took a deep breath to suppress another fit of laughter. "Forgive me, Eleonora, but I just can't picture you as a dog. You'd be much better suited to the role of a cruel mistress." Eleonora took this as a compliment. She sighed heavily again and said, "I signed up for the theater group too late. All the good roles were already taken. I got stuck with Zuchka while my friend is playing Zuza. But I'm not sure how the audience will react to her portrayal. Zenobia easily weighs over 150 kilos, which seems a bit much for a lapdog." Eleonora's regret was so sincere that Carmelita felt ashamed of her laughter. She decided to cheer her mother-in-law up with some encouragement about the role assignments. I think the role of Zuzka is much more interesting. It's more dramatic and requires real skill from the performer. Eleonora's face lit up with a happy smile again. I thought so too. Carmelita, just don't tell Andre yet. I'll invite him to the premiere and surprise him. Carmelita's vivid imagination kicked in, and she pictured Andre's face when he saw his mother on stage as a mutt named Zuzka. The mental image was priceless. Having delivered the main news of the day, Eleonora moved on to the next item on her agenda. Carmelita, we've been chatting so much that I've worked up an appetite. I hope you've got something to snack on. Carmelita had to spend another hour catering to her demanding mother-in-law. She was completely drained by the time Eleonora finally announced, "Oh, I've overstayed my welcome. I need to get home. I have rehearsal tonight, and I haven't even memorized my monologue yet." After ushering Eleonora out, Carmelita collapsed onto the bed. Her last conscious thought before falling asleep was, "My mother-in-law is an actress capable of playing any role. After all, she's been pretending to be someone else her entire life. This theater group is perfect for her. Maybe she'll visit us less often now." Carmelita didn't manage to get a good rest. Her dreams were filled with giant dogs that had human faces. She was woken by her son returning from school. "Mom, was your shift that rough?" "Why do you ask?" Carmelita peeked out from under the blanket. Eduardo smirked. "You were yelling something strange, then you started talking about dogs." He gave her a curious look. "Are you and Dad planning to get a dog?" "I wouldn't mind." Carmelita shook her head emphatically. "No, heaven forbid. I can barely keep up cleaning after you two as it is. If we add a pet to the mix, I might as well wave a white flag." Her head was pounding, and she couldn't seem to get anything done. She had to take a painkiller to feel somewhat better. It wasn't until late that night, when Andre was peacefully snoring beside her, that Carmelita remembered the strange letter. She decided not to wake her husband to ask who the author was and why this Yanina was seeking his help. "I'll find out everything tomorrow," she thought, and with that reassuring notion, she drifted off to sleep. Carmelita was jolted awake by a loud crash from the kitchen, followed by the sound of shattering glass. She leapt out of bed. "They're going to break all the dishes." She stormed into the kitchen, ready to unleash her anger on the culprits of the morning disaster. But when she saw Eduardo's frightened expression, she held back her emotions and asked calmly, "What's going on here?" Her son gestured toward the sink. "Mom, I swear, it wasn't on purpose. It just slipped out of my hands and fell." "What slipped?" "A cup." Carmelita followed her son's gaze and saw the shattered pieces on the floor. She felt like crying. "My favorite cup." "Thank you, son, that's just what I needed." Eduardo jumped up and approached his mother. "Mom, I didn't mean to. It just happened. I accidentally bumped your cup while grabbing mine. I'll clean it up right now." The boy grabbed a broom, but Carmelita quickly stopped him. "You'll be late for school. I'll clean it up myself." "Has your dad already left?" From the hallway, her son answered. "He left really early today. Didn't even go for his run. I asked him why, and he told me not to stick my nose into adult business." A second later, the door slammed shut, leaving Carmelita alone with her thoughts. Her husband's strange behavior puzzled her. Andre skipped his morning run only for two reasons: illness or a natural disaster. Since the weather outside was calm, with even the autumn sun generously shining, Carmelita suspected her husband might be unwell. But she quickly dismissed the thought. Andre was meticulous about his health and would alert everyone at the slightest sign of a sniffle. It must be something else that made him radically change his routine, Carmelita thought. Could it be that letter? She pulled the note from the unknown Yanina out of the drawer and read it again. Then she glanced at the clock. "If I hurry, I can make it there and back today," she said to herself. Carmelita called the bus station to find out how to get to Andreevka. The dispatcher, sounding half asleep, replied, "A minibus leaves in half an hour. It'll get you to Andreevka faster than the regular bus." Carmelita checked the time again. "I won't have time for breakfast." "Oh well, I'll grab something on the way." Carmelita reached Andreevka without incident, the journey taking just over an hour. The settlement was impressive not only for its size, but also for its cleanliness. The sidewalks in the town center were paved with tiles, and nearly every house had flower beds in full bloom. The colorful display made the autumn day feel less somber. "This is nice," Carmelita murmured, taking in the scenery. "It's beautiful here." A woman in her 40s walked past and remarked, "Of course it's beautiful. Better than some cities." Carmelita hurried after the stranger. "Excuse me, please, wait." The woman stopped. "Well, I'm waiting." Carmelita quickly began to explain. "You probably know everyone around here. Can you tell me where the Cella family lives?" The woman laughed. "Half the village here are Cellas." "Who exactly are you looking for?" "Yanina." The woman paused for a few seconds to think. "Yanina? The librarian's daughter?" Carmelita instinctively nodded, and the stranger briefly explained. "That's on Central Street. Go all the way to the end and turn left into the alley. The librarian's house will be the third from the corner." "Got it?" Carmelita nodded and headed in the direction she was given. But the villager wasn't satisfied with this abrupt departure. She called after her. "Hey, miss. Wait, where are you rushing off to? Tell me, how are you related to Maria?" Carmelita replied over her shoulder, "I'm her friend from college." A surprised voice followed her. "But Maria studied at the university, didn't she?" "She didn't finish, though, got married to a city man and later divorced." "Ah, what's the world coming to? People get together and split up just as fast," added another voice to the familiar chatter of the first woman. "What kind of bird has flown into Andreevka now?" The villager responded, "How would I know? It's my first time seeing her." She asked about Maria the librarian, maybe she's a relative? "Poor woman. She's still so young but wasting away like a candle, burning up before our eyes," someone else commented. Carmelita realized the last remark referred to Maria, whose daughter had written her husband that touching letter. Maria's house, the librarian's home, stood out sharply from the neighboring ones. The paint on the wooden structure had long since peeled, and the surrounding yard was in disrepair, radiating a silent cry for a caring owner. Carmelita thought, "Poor woman, she's probably living alone without a husband." She stopped at the crooked gate and called out, "May I come in?" No one answered, so Carmelita cautiously stepped into the yard. Not wanting to be mistaken for an intruder, she called out again, "Is anyone home?" The door creaked open, and a thin woman in a faded housecoat appeared on the porch, staring at the visitor with a questioning look. "Who are you?" Carmelita blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "I'm from the school. Yanina's new teacher. I'd like to see your daughter." The woman gave her a suspicious once-over. "Yanina hasn't come back from school yet. It would have been easier to find her there than walking all the way across the village." "What's this about?" "As far as I know, no one's complained about her. Or has she done something wrong?" It was clear that Maria was worried. Carmelita tried to reassure her. "Your Yanina is a wonderful girl. I've come for a completely different reason. She told me about your situation, which is why I'm here." Maria sighed. "Come inside. No point talking on the doorstep, and everyone here has ears. I don't like people gossiping about me." Carmelita followed her into the house. Inside, everything was spotless despite the modest furnishings. Maria gestured toward the table. "Have a seat. I'm listening." Carmelita settled into a chair and said firmly, "Maria, I want to help you." The woman smirked. "I'm curious. How exactly do you think you can help me?" Carmelita felt a jolt, as if struck by electricity. From this young woman, likely her peer, there emanated a sense of death. Over her many years working in the hospital, Carmelita had encountered this phenomenon often. She could unerringly sense when a patient was nearing the end of their life. For Maria, the faint breath of death was present, though still subtle, yet unmistakable. Carmelita spoke quietly but with conviction. "Maria, I'll do my best to help you. I have many contacts in the medical field. In the coming days, I'll arrange for you to be seen by the best specialists." A faint smile of hopelessness appeared on Maria's face. "Thank you for your kind heart. But I don't think I can be helped anymore. A few months ago, I might have had a chance, but I didn't have the money for treatment. And I still don't." Carmelita pressed further. "What about family? Surely you have someone who could help." Maria sat down on a chair next to her guest, her expression turning pensive. "Family? Well, I do have some. An uncle, but he wants nothing to do with me." Holding her breath, Carmelita asked the next question. "And a husband?" Maria gave her a peculiar look. "A husband? Yes, I had a husband once. But that was so long ago that I don't even remember his face or voice. Maybe it's for the best, to forget someone who betrayed you." Carmelita sat in silence, sensing that this unfortunate woman needed to unburden herself. Maria was quiet for several minutes, her distant gaze suggesting her thoughts were far away. Finally, she spoke softly. "I see you're willing to listen to my story. Very well, I'll tell you everything and try not to bore you with unnecessary details. I'm an orphan. My parents died in a fire when I was very little. The farm caught fire, and they ran to save the cows. They were both so brave. People shouted at them to save themselves, but they started leading the cattle out instead. They had nearly saved all the animals when one of the workers screamed, 'There are calves still inside.' My father ran to rescue the babies, and that's when the roof collapsed. My mother screamed and ran after him. She tried to pull him out, but there was a second collapse of the burning roof. I don't remember any of it. I rely on what my uncle, my father's brother, told me. He took me in afterward, even though his wife was against it." Maria paused, lost again in her somber thoughts, while Carmelita waited patiently for her to continue. "I don't think you'd care to hear how my aunt treated me. My uncle already had 3 boys of his own, and then there was me, an extra little burden. Let's just say I suffered, not only from my aunt, but also from my cousins. I hated everyone in that house and dreamed of escaping. I finally managed to do so after finishing school. I enrolled in a teacher's college and almost immediately met Andre." At the mention of her husband's name, Carmelita flinched. Maria noticed and asked kindly, "Are you cold? It's chilly in the house. We haven't lit the stove yet. We need to save firewood." Carmelita reassured her. "No, I'm fine. Please, go on." "No, I'm not cold. Please, go on." Maria nodded and continued her story in the same measured tone. "Well, everything with Andre was fine until his mother found out about our relationship. She waited for me outside the institute one day, started insulting me, and even threatened to have me expelled. Of course, I broke down in tears and told Andre. He suggested we secretly get married behind her back. At the time, it felt romantic to both of us," Maria said, smiling for the first time during their meeting. "For 6 months, we managed to keep our relationship a secret. We rented a room from an elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of town, and there, we enjoyed our stolen happiness. But Andre quickly grew tired of the romance. He started coming around less and less, and by then, I was 9 months pregnant. The landlady was demanding 3 months' rent, and I didn't have any money. So, I mustered up the courage and went to his mother's apartment. When Andre saw me, he started trembling like a leaf. He couldn't say a word, and his mother began shoving me out the door, yelling, 'Get out!' My Andre has found himself a decent girl, the granddaughter of a professor. They're getting married soon. I won't let you ruin my son's life." That's when I told her that bigamy is illegal in our country and shoved my passport with our marriage stamp under her nose. She was stunned. Maria was breathing heavily, and Carmelita could see how difficult this confession was for her. "Are you tired? Should we stop?" Carmelita asked gently. Maria shook her head. No, I need to get this out. I feel like I don't have much time left, and I can't tell my daughter everything. I've almost shared my whole story with you anyway." Andre was outraged by what I did. He started yelling that he had already filed for divorce. Then, right in front of me, he tore up his passport and threw it in my face, saying I wouldn't get anything from him. I didn't wait for the two of them to start beating me and quietly left. I hoped my uncle would help me, but he wouldn't even let me inside. He told me to get lost and go back to Andreevka, to my parents' house. So, I went. Carmelita was deeply worried. "And then? How did you survive on your own with a baby? Why didn't you file for child support from your ex-husband?" Maria stood up, her tone changing. "As you can see, I didn't die. And I didn't file for child support because I didn't want that scumbag involved in my daughter's life. I survived without his dirty money and raised my daughter. Yanina will be 15 soon. And if it weren't for this sudden illness..." Carmelita grabbed Maria's hands. "I will help you. You must not lose hope." The heavy door slammed, and a girl in a school uniform entered the room. Maria immediately became flustered. "Here comes Yanina." "Sweetheart, Carmelita's here waiting for you, your new teacher." The girl scanned Carmelita with a hostile look. "A teacher? Mom, you must be mistaken. We still have all our old teachers." Maria turned to Carmelita, her expression alarmed. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Yanina also fixed an unfriendly gaze on Carmelita. Chela knew she couldn't reveal the full truth in such a tense situation. To lighten the mood, she smiled and said, "You can think of me as a fairy godmother or a guest from the future, whichever you prefer. But I came here to help you." Yanina stared at her for a long time before finally asking in a voice hoarse with emotion, "Is it true that you want to help my mom? You're not lying?" Carmelita felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Lying to someone who's sick is a crime. I will absolutely help your mom." Still looking into her eyes, the girl whispered, "I wrote to someone about our trouble. Did you read my letter?" "Yes, I read your letter and came here immediately." Yanina leaned into Carmelita and began to cry. The girl's tears spoke louder than any words or grand promises. Carmelita silently vowed to herself that she would do everything possible for these two women. After all, unknowingly, she had taken their happiness and lived with it for nearly 15 years. Maria's story deeply moved Carmelita. On her way home, she thought, "Our lives are so similar. I also lost my mother early, and my father died in an accident later. But I was luckier because my grandparents raised me." What surprised Carmelita even more was that Andre had never told her he had been married before. She recalled how, before filing their marriage application, he had awkwardly said, "You won't believe it, but my passport was stolen on the train 2 days ago. We'll have to wait until they issue a new one." They had gone together to the passport office for the new document. Carmelita had joked at the time, "I should check to make sure you don't have a marriage stamp in here." But the new passport was clean. It was likely thanks to Eleonora's connections that there was no record of his previous marriage or divorce. Carmelita felt uneasy that only now, after so many years, she had learned about this part of her husband's past. She didn't yet know what to do with the new information. In this state of uncertainty, she arrived home. Both Andre and Eduardo were already there. At her appearance, her son remarked sarcastically, "And here comes Mom." Her husband asked indifferently, "Where have you been?" "We were starting to worry. We almost filed a missing person report." Matching his tone, Carmelita replied, "I had the day off, so I decided to get some fresh air." Andre drawled knowingly, Ah, I see. Mom went shopping? Carmelita said nothing and went to the bedroom. She changed her clothes and was about to head to the kitchen when she stopped. Quietly, she opened the drawer of a stylish dresser and took out an antique jewelry box inlaid with colorful stones. The heirloom had been passed down to her from her grandmother, and her grandfather used to put aside a little money in it every month from his pension and salary. Venceslo had lectured at the university almost until the end of his life, leaving a substantial sum for his granddaughter. Once, Carmelita had teased him. "Grandpa, serious people keep their savings in the bank." Venceslo had gotten angry. "Call me Andreas if you want, but I don't trust banks," her grandfather said firmly. Carmelita laughed. "And what if someone steals your box?" The old man replied confidently. "If you keep your mouth shut, no one will steal it. And the money will always be within reach when it's needed." In the early years of her marriage, both she and Andre would add a little to the box, but over time, they only withdrew from it. Carmelita wanted to count the cash inside, but her husband's demanding voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mom, Carmelita, where are you stuck? Your men are starving." She rushed toward the open drawer but then paused, deciding to move the hiding place. She tucked the box into a far corner of the attic storage. "This will be safer," she whispered, before heading off to her household duties. The following night shift was relatively calm. Taking advantage of the lull, Carmelita asked the on-call doctor for a few minutes of his time. The young doctor didn't hesitate. "Carmelita, I'm happy to chat with you until the end of the shift if you want." Encouraged by Soto's optimism, Carmelita got straight to the point. "Arturo, my relative is seriously ill, but she's in a complicated family situation, so her treatment hasn't progressed as it should. Would you take a look at her medical record? She went to the regional clinic for a consultation a couple of months ago." Arturo carefully read through Maria's report while Carmelita waited impatiently. "Arturo, what do you think?" she asked. Dr. Soto sighed. "Unfortunately, there's nothing reassuring here. She needs further tests, and only after that can we talk about treatment options." "Carmelita, why has this woman let things get so bad? With a diagnosis like this, you can't afford to lose even a day, and here, 2 whole months have been wasted." Carmelita sighed regretfully. "The reason is simple, she didn't have any money." Arturo looked at her in surprise. "And now she does?" "Yes, now we have the necessary funds. The question is whether treatment is still worthwhile." Arturo raised a finger meaningfully. "Colleague, there is always a point, even in the most hopeless situations. And you know that better than I do. Let's agree on this. Bring your relative here as soon as possible, and I'll arrange a consultation with the best hematologist. He's a friend of my father and my favorite professor from university." For the first time in 2 chaotic days, Carmelita felt some relief. "Now I just need to convince Maria. I'll go to Andreevka today," she decided. After her night shift, Carmelita hurried home, trying to ignore her exhaustion. She changed clothes, retrieved her cherished jewelry box, and took out almost all the money inside. Then she called Maria. "I'll be there soon. Get everything you need for the hospital ready. This afternoon, a very good doctor will see you." Maria tried to protest, but Carmelita cut her off. "Maria, let's not waste time on unnecessary talk. I think you should make arrangements for Yanina. In any case, your daughter can stay with me." "No, my husband won't mind. Don't worry about that." "Thank you, Carmelita. You really are like a fairy godmother from a story," Maria said, her voice breaking with sobs. To save time, Carmelita booked a taxi. The driver was surprised when he heard the destination. "Ma'am, going to Andreevka and back will cost you a pretty penny." Carmelita reassured him. "Don't worry, I'll cover the cost. It's just that my relative is very ill, and she won't be able to endure the journey to the city by bus." Arturo kept his promise and was waiting for them at the entrance to the clinic where the renowned hematologist worked. First, we'll do a complete diagnostic workup, and then we'll evaluate the patient's chances, he said, leading the women inside. Maria, visibly frightened, looked around nervously. Finding a moment, she whispered to Carmelita, "Maybe this is all for nothing? Maybe it's not worth spending so much money on me? Such a huge sum. I won't be able to pay you back right away." Carmelita embraced the distraught woman and felt her trembling. "Maria, right now, the most important thing is your life. Money comes and goes. Honestly, I don't mind spending it on something good. Won't your husband scold you?" Maria asked hesitantly. Carmelita replied confidently, "No, he won't." Maria was called into the diagnostic imaging room by a nurse, leaving Carmelita to wait in the corridor. It wasn't until evening that they saw the professor for a consultation. The esteemed doctor spent about an hour with Maria in his office before inviting Dr. Soto in. While waiting for the verdict, Maria trembled with anxiety, and Carmelita, exhausted and sleep-deprived, could barely stay upright. Finally, Arturo emerged from the office. "The professor has decided to take on your relative's case himself. This means she has a chance, not for a complete recovery, but she could still enjoy life for another 5 or even 10 years. Carmelita returned home tired but nearly elated. She silently thanked fate for allowing her to do another good deed. It felt even more meaningful since she had helped not a stranger but, paradoxically, someone who was almost family. As she imagined sinking into a warm bath and falling into a deep sleep afterward, Carmelita opened her apartment door and realized there was someone else there besides her husband and son. The familiar pair of shoes in the entryway and the voices coming from the kitchen confirmed it. She listened closely. Not her again. I can handle anything but another round of Eleonora's endless chatter. Andre poked his head out of the kitchen. Ah, here's our Carmelita. You've been staying out late too often lately. It's starting to make me suspicious. Though Andre's tone was lighthearted, Carmelita wasn't in the mood for jokes. She responded curtly. Constant suspicion is a bad sign, Andre. I had to help a friend get admitted to the hospital for treatment, that's why I was late. Andre gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. You're like Mother Teresa, helping everyone and taking care of everything. Meanwhile, Eleonora and I have been waiting for you, hoping for some help ourselves. Carmelita followed her husband into the kitchen. Andre smiled proudly and said, Eduardo and I did some cooking tonight. Tell us, Mrs. Cella, what you think of our culinary skills. It's a simple dish, but hearty. The spaghetti looked genuinely appetizing. Carmelita's mouth watered, and she eagerly dug into the food. Eleonora, however, couldn't resist a snide remark. Chew your food, at least. How can you just gulp it down like that? You're a medical professional, you should know this can lead to stomach ulcers. Andre, irritated, interjected. Mom, you could have stayed quiet, but no, you just had to chime in, Andre said, giving his mother a pointed look. Eleonora coyly covered her mouth with her hand. Fine, I'm quiet now. Not another word. After satisfying her hunger, Carmelita turned to her husband. Now we can talk business. Eleonora opened her mouth to speak, but Andre shot her a stern look. He sat down next to Carmelita and wrapped an arm around her waist. Carmelita, here's the thing. You know that older people always have health issues. Carmelita nodded. I know, Andre. I deal with it every day at work. So, please, get to the point. Andre stood up. All right, I'll be direct. Mom's health is fragile, and she needs fresh air. That's hard to come by in a big city. It's causing her apathy and insomnia. Carmelita responded with a touch of irony. Andre, I asked you to be direct. Tell me, how can I help your mom, my dear mother-in-law? Andre leaned against the table, subtly closing the space around Carmelita. Mom has been dreaming of living in the countryside for a long time. But buying a cottage requires a lot of money, and she doesn't have that kind of cash. Carmelita laughed. And what does that have to do with me? His irritation was palpable, but Andre restrained himself, knowing he'd have to use gentleness to get his way. He tried to embrace Carmelita again. Carmelita, you have that magical little box filled with money. The savings are just sitting there doing nothing. Mom could buy a nice little house with that money, and we could visit her every week. We've already found a charming place at a great price. The meeting with the seller is tomorrow. So, you and your mom already made the decision without me? Carmelita freed herself from his embrace and turned her gaze to Eleonora. Eleonora, what about the theater and your role? Eleonora's face lit up with a happy smile. Carmelita, one doesn't interfere with the other. It's only a 20-minute bus ride from the cottage to the city center. We have rehearsals 3 times a week. Besides, I'm not planning to live on the cottage full-time. I'll spend a few days in the city, and when I get tired of it, I'll go to the cottage. At least it'll bring some variety to my life. Carmelita nodded. Well, you've certainly thought this through. Andre's face turned red, then pale, a clear sign he was losing patience. Carmelita, can we stop with the questioning? Where's the box? I looked for it in its usual spot and couldn't find it. Did you move it and forget to tell me? The woman asked sarcastically. And why should I warn you? It's my money. She disappeared into the bedroom and returned a minute later holding the box. Here you go, Andre. Andre lifted the lid of the charming little chest and froze. There's almost nothing here. Carmelita, where's the money? She was thoroughly tired of this circus and replied bluntly. It's my money, Andre. I spent it on something I thought was more important than buying a cottage for your mother. Eleonora jumped up as if stung. Andre, I don't know how you put up with this. If I were you, I'd have thrown this insolent woman out long ago. And for what? She's not even a decent woman, just some nurse. Carmelita realized her moment had come. Keeping her composure, she said, Eleonora, this is my apartment, and you won't be able to throw me out, like you did with Maria, your son's first wife. This time, your signature move won't work, and you'll have to buy your cottage with your own money. Eleonora was so outraged that she began to stammer. We'll take this to court and get the property divided. Andre, how can you just stand there while your mother is being humiliated? Andre shot a fiery glare at his wife. We'll talk about this later, Carmelita. I need to see Mom out. Carmelita didn't wait for her husband to return. She threw his pillow onto the couch in the living room and locked herself in the bedroom. Through her half-sleep, she heard Andre banging on the door, demanding to be let in, but she didn't respond. In the morning, she found Andre in the kitchen. He was in a foul mood and glared at her. Carmelita, this can't go on any longer. She nodded in agreement. You're right, Andre. After everything I've learned, I can't stay married to you. Andre exploded. What? You want a divorce? Fine. I'll make your life miserable. You're nothing, useless, uneducated. If I hadn't married you, you'd have ended up with some mechanic or bus driver. His tirade was interrupted by Eduardo. Dad, you should wear Napoleon's hat, it would suit you. He thought he was exceptional too. Andre stormed out of the kitchen. You're all conspiring against me? Fine. You'll both regret this. The door slammed loudly, making both mother and son flinch. That evening, Andre came back to pack his things. He expected his wife and son to cry and beg him to stay. Instead, Eduardo locked himself in his room and only emerged after his father left. He hugged Carmelita and said confidently, Mom, don't worry. Dad will come to his senses and come back. Mom, is it true that I have, like, a half-sister? Carmelita looked at her son in surprise. And how do you know that? The boy smirked. Mom, it's the 21st century. Yanina and I crossed paths on social media and chatted a bit. She's cool, a smart girl. It's just a shame her mom is so sick. By the way, We could all go visit her together. Carmelita looked at her son lovingly. You're so grown up and kind. Eduardo grinned. Takes after you, Mom. I've already decided that after school, I'm going to apply to medical school. Andre reminded them of his existence a month after his impulsive departure. He called Carmelita beforehand. Carmelita, can I come over? We need to talk. She replied curtly into the phone. Come. We'll talk. At the agreed time, Andre arrived, but instead of using his key, he rang the doorbell. It was Yanina who answered the door. Who are you looking for? Andre was taken aback, seeing an unfamiliar girl in the apartment he had so recently considered his own. He asked challengingly, And who are you? One of Eduardo's friends? The girl smirked. No, I'm his sister. Hello, Dad. Andre fled down the stairs, skipping 2 steps at a time. The encounter with his past in the form of the daughter he had abandoned terrified him. He also recalled the letter in which Yanina had begged him for help. But fate does not forgive such mistakes, and Andre paid dearly for his actions. He remarried twice more but never found happiness. A year after the divorce, Carmelita married one of her colleagues. Maria's life also improved. After prolonged treatment, she reached a stage of stable remission. She remarried and even had a son. But Maria never forgot who she owed her life to.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.